BBC portrays an indebted African father selling his twin daughters into sexual slavery with adult men as a man who is forced to make difficult choices. What?
He's referring to a very recent BBC article titled "Selling Children to Survive: Afghan Fathers Forced to Make Impossible Choices." Now, this article reports on the real dire circumstances in Afghanistan right now. The poverty in that country is multidimensional. Unemployment is rife, healthcare is struggling, and the levels of hunger are record-breaking. It is really terrible living in Afghanistan. The article features individual stories from Afghan men. Jumal Khan, 45, who has made only $3 a day for the past 6 weeks. Robani, whose children hadn't eaten for 2 days. Khwaja Ahmed, who lost his older children. And then we get to Abdul Rashid Azimi.
Abdul Rashid Azimi's home, we're suddenly confronted by the devastating impact. He calls for his daughters. Rukia and Ruhila are twins. They're 7. Abdul is eager to explain why he's making unbearable choices. I'm ready to sell my daughters. I'm poor and in debt.
Oh my God.
But what
He's
can I
selling
give?
his kids?
But it's the only way to feed my other children.
This is devastating to watch, and there are many other things to note about this story and about Afghan fathers selling their children to survive. But first, the people on Twitter had a lot to say about this.
The post got community noted. BBC frames Afghan fathers selling their daughters as sympathetic. All profiled cases involve girls 5 years old. Selling daughters for marriage is a long-standing cultural practice in parts of Afghanistan. BBC focuses on fathers' distress over the outcomes for girls, parentheses.
Some people may not agree with me, but I don't completely agree with this community note. Fathers selling their daughters to survive is a sympathetic thing. In ancient Israel, mothers were cooking their children to survive. So the despicable things people do to survive can be indicative of the sympathetic situation they find themselves in. But back to the community note, the BBC report doesn't deny or hide these girls' ages. And yes, this is a long-standing culture in Afghanistan. But what is happening here is not simply Afghan culture at work. There is a subtext of poverty and starvation at play here. And it is okay for the BBC to make that the focus of their report. It is also not entirely true that the BBC focuses on fathers' distress over outcomes for the girls. The article is just talking about poverty in Afghanistan, and the story of Abdul Rashid Azimi is just one out of many anecdotes it offers. I know the BBC is notorious for bad reporting, and I'm no fan of the BBC, but the criticism here is exaggerated.
Not once does this article ask who is buying the children and why.
So the problem with the article is that it wasn't stating the obvious. Okay.
Afghani men are selling their girls to other Afghani men. Get it right, you utter disgrace.
So Afghan men selling Afghan girls to other Afghan men is an excellent title for a report on poverty and hunger in Afghanistan. Okay.
They're voluntarily doing this to make money, as they have done in the Middle East for centuries.
That's a fair criticism. These Afghan fathers have a choice, and they are choosing to sell their daughters. Poverty is no excuse, but this criticism would have been more effective if Ali Bedstocki had read the article. Like everything else in Islam, the more you read, the crazier it gets.
Men sell their daughters, and the BBC has a poor man's take. You don't hate the BBC enough.
Clearly, some people are just being outraged because it is a trend. And I'm not saying don't hate the BBC, but if you do it for a good reason.
And this is the reason why they're doing it. They're doing it because they want to portray these people as being sympathetic so they can soften people's opinions on them through immigration.
I get that, but is that all you are going to say? He's looking at this from a Western political lens without more, and yet he's blaming the BBC for doing the same thing. He sees poverty and starvation in a third world country, and his mind instantly goes to migration. And I get it, abject poverty in other parts of the world has become the justification for unvetted mass migration in the West. But there is much more to learn from this story than just that.
They're trying to literally whitewash and make it look like selling your young, like 6-year-old daughters into slavery. How do you possibly try to paint him out as if he's the victim?
But there is a sense in which these men are victims. They live in Afghanistan under the Taliban. They have no job. They are burying their children. And to make matters worse, their wicked culture offers them the only escape of selling off their daughters. This is the hand they've been dealt, and they are victims of that. They are victims of a laundry list of unfortunate circumstances.
There should be no moral equivalency that is drawn at at all to this. This is sick, deranged.
Thank you for stating the obvious. The bar is so low in the West that saying 2 plus 2 equals 4 puts you on the same level as Pythagoras.
How do people defend this? The reason why they defend it is because it is anti-Western propaganda. Once you understand that these people hate you and they want to demographically replace you in your own countries, then you will finally understand their mind.
What? What has any of that to do with this? How do you go from the BBC's whitewashing the degeneracy of Afghan men to these Afghans hate you and want to replace you? No, these very ones on your screen just want to survive. And sure, they are going about it in a vile, despicable way. But I promise you, the last thing on their mind is how to replace the white population in America.
The problem that I think a lot of people have is that they're naive and they assume that these people have some sort of a good motive. They have no good motive.
No, that's not true. People with mistaken beliefs or a broken moral compass often do evil things with good intentions. Even Jesus told his disciples that a time would come when people would kill them thinking they were doing God a service. And these people have an erroneous belief that has led them to selling their daughters to survive. But Asmongold isn't exploring that.
They are trying to impose an ideology of cultural relativism to the most disgusting aspects of behavior around the world. It's filthy.
Isn't it interesting that he just formed an opinion on this article based solely on the headline and comments about it on Twitter, and he hasn't bothered to read even a paragraph from the report? But if he had bothered to read the article, here are some things he and others like him would have noticed about the story of Abdul Rashid Azimi. First, the article says Abdul tells us he's willing to sell his girls for marriage or for domestic work. Selling his girls for marriage is an interesting phrase that hides a lot in plain sight. If you marry off your child, that's not selling them. Yes, in Islam, the marriage contract requires a dowry, but that doesn't turn the marriage contract into a sales contract. So what is being discussed here is child marriage, not necessarily child slavery. And this is why only girls are being sold, not boys.
So he sold the girls to feed the boy. Man.
The article claims the choice to sell daughters over sons is because culturally sons are widely seen as future breadwinners. And in Afghanistan, with the Taliban's restriction on education and work for women and girls, it is even more pronounced. But that doesn't make sense because the article spends its first few paragraphs discussing the height of unemployment in Afghanistan. Unemployment is rife, right? So there is no bread for the sons to win. They are just as useless as the daughters in this regard. And then the article states, additionally, there is a tradition in which marital gift is given to the family of the girl from the family of the boy during marriage. Now that's the real issue at play here. This practice only affects girls because it is not a sale, it is a marriage. And the rate of child brides in Afghanistan is crazy. With a population of 42 million, it is home to 4 million child brides, and almost 800,000 of them get married before age 15. But there is more. The BBC article tells us about another man, Saeed Ahmed, who married his 5-year-old after she got appendicitis and a cyst in her liver. He said, I had no money to pay for the medical expenses, so I sold my daughter to a relative. He sold his daughter to a relative. A lot to unpack there. But first, a lot of murky terminology is being used. As we have seen, this is not a sale, it is a marriage. And the article later admits this, quoting the father saying, if I had taken the whole sum at that time, he would have taken her away. So I told him, just give me enough for her treatment now. And in the next 5 years, you can give me the rest, after which you can take her. She will become his daughter-in-law. Why would she become his daughter-in-law? Because it is a marriage, not a sale. And this is not just any kind of marriage. This is marriage to a relative. This is cousin marriage. Imagine your relative has a 5-year-old daughter with appendicitis and a cyst in her liver, and the only way you can think of helping them is to marry their sick daughter to your son. You had the money to help them, and there is the fact that this is your brother's young daughter. But that's not enough. She has to become your son's wife when she is 10 before you would offer to help. Why would people in a society behave like this? The answer begins with the Taliban. They banned female education, female voices, female faces, and female solo travel. But they didn't ban child marriage. Instead, they ruled that the silence of a virgin girl may be interpreted as consent to marriage. And they got this from Muhammad, who Aisha asked, "Oh Allah's messenger, should the women be asked for their consent to their marriage?" He said yes. Then Aisha said, "A virgin, if asked, feels shy and keeps quiet." And Muhammad replied, "Her silence means her consent." And let's not forget Sahih Bukhari 5133, where Aisha narrated that Muhammad married her when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Bukhari even titled the hadith, giving one's young children in marriage is permissible. So this is not just about Afghanistan. This is not just about the Middle East. This is about the religion of over 2 billion people today. A religion where child marriage and cousin marriage are permissible. Muhammad not only married a child but also his cousin, and both marriages happened because Allah commanded it. Of course, the BBC would not mention this. That's Islamophobia. But neither did Asmongold and his accomplices on Twitter. I don't think the prominent voices in the West can afford to be ignorant about Islam.
Once you understand that these people hate you and they want to demographically replace you in your own countries, then you will finally understand their mind.
But he doesn't understand their mind either. You can't understand the minds of these people if you don't understand Islam. And how can you understand Islam when you don't read beyond the BBC headline about it? This is really unfortunate.
I am so glad people are calling this out. I really am.
This is a part of our religion. There's a reason to it. Yeah? We have no doubt, and we're proud of that.